To set the stage briefly for what is actually happening beneath the surface, our favorite leather-clad enforcer, Jason, has been pulled back into the orbit of the criminal underworld. But absolutely not by his own choice, and certainly not out of some misplaced sense of loyalty. He has been completely weaponized by the WSB. They have handed him a covert mandate that feels significantly less like an intelligence mission and much more like a targeted execution order. He is currently tasked with operating as a high-level mole, a deep cover operative specifically designed to trigger the simultaneous collapse of multiple power centers. And the targets on his mandated hit list, they include highly dangerous rogue elements within the agency itself, like Ross and Jack, but the true crown jewel of this operation, the ultimate test of his total compliance, is Sonny. This is exactly where the story shifts from a standard, predictable mob drama into a chilling, high-stakes psychological thriller. For decades, the absolute defining characteristic of Jason has been his unwavering, unquestioning loyalty. It was not just a personality trait, it was his entire religion. He was the immovable object, the silent guardian who would gladly go to federal prison or disappear into the night to protect his boss. Now, the writers are taking that core identity, that fundamental pillar of his existence, and twisting it into a jagged weapon to be used against him. The WSB is not just asking him to plant bugs or gather passive intelligence. They are actively demanding that he become the sole architect of a spectacular, bloody downfall. He is being forced to look directly at the man who gave him a life, a purpose, and a family, and calculate the exact, precise angle of the blade needed to cut him down. It is a profound violation of his fundamental nature. Think about the heavy, suffocating scenes we are seeing, or the ones we know are inevitably coming very soon. Picture Jason standing in the familiar dim light of the Syndicate's main office. In the past, his silence in that specific room meant absolute solidarity. It meant he was absorbing the external threats and quietly preparing to eliminate them on behalf of the boss. But right now, that silence has become predatory. When he looks at Sonny, he is no longer seeing a lifelong friend or a trusted mentor. He is systematically mapping out critical vulnerabilities. He is mentally noting the blind spots in the security detail, identifying the trusted lieutenants who can be easily flipped, and locating the financial supply lines that can be swiftly severed. Every single nod of agreement he gives is a calculated lie. Every shared drink is metaphorically laced with the poison of his impending betrayal. We are watching a man actively haunt his own life, flawlessly playing the role of the loyal son while secretly, methodically building the gallows. But why would a man of his legendary stubbornness ever agree to this absolute nightmare? Why not just shoot his way out of the corner, as he has done 100 times before in impossible situations? This is where the WSB proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are far more ruthless and terrifying than any street-level cartel. They did not threaten him with a lifetime in a black site prison or even with death. They know perfectly well that he welcomes both with open arms. Instead, they surgically targeted the absolute only crack in his impenetrable armor, Danny. The promise the agency made is as cold as absolute zero. They told him to dismantle the criminal empire, eliminate the specified targets, and his boy, along with the rest of his innocent family, gets absolute ironclad protection from the fallout. If he refuses, or if he slips up even once, the protective shield drops immediately, and the catastrophic consequences will fall directly on the child. The WSB has successfully weaponized his fatherhood against him. Imagine the sheer, crushing psychological weight of carrying that impossible choice every single second of the day. We have all seen those quiet, fleeting, heartbreaking moments where Jason watches Danny from a distance. The boy is rapidly growing up, navigating his own complicated, increasingly dangerous world, completely unaware that his father's immortal soul is the exact currency currently paying for his daily safety. Every single time Jason sees his son smile, he is violently reminded of the immense amount of blood he is going to have to spill to keep that specific smile safe. He cannot explain his coldness. He cannot warn anyone about the impending storm. He just has to swallow the agonizing guilt and rigidly put on the emotionless mask of the cold, unfeeling enforcer. It is a brilliant narrative choice because it completely strips away his legendary agency. The most invincible man in the city is suddenly the most powerless person in any given room, tightly bound by invisible chains forged entirely from his own desperate love. And let us absolutely not ignore the broader, incredibly cynical, and deeply corrupt game the WSB is playing here on a macro level. This is not just about a noble quest to clean up the dangerous streets. This is a massive, incredibly dirty internal purge of their own ranks. The WSB is a heavily fractured, deeply compromised organization, and they are using Jason as their personal, deniable janitor to clean up their own catastrophic administrative messes. We already know that Ross is out there operating as a rogue double agent, working hand in hand with international criminals like Jens, completely off the official leash. Jack is playing his own highly manipulative, self-serving games, pulling dangerous strings from the deep shadows. The agency simply cannot afford a massive public scandal or a congressional hearing, so they send in the untraceable ghost. They are using a known criminal to assassinate their own rogue intelligence officers, neatly wrapping their dirty, illegal wet work in the pristine guise of national security. This specific dynamic creates a truly fascinating thematic parallel that I cannot stop thinking about. On one side of his life, you have the passionate, chaotic, blood-bound loyalty of the mob. On the other side, you have the sterile, bureaucratic, terrifying ruthlessness of the WSB. Consider the deeply unsettling interactions Jason must endure with his intelligence handlers. There is absolutely no honor among these suited spies. They sit in bright, clean, sanitized rooms, wearing sharp designer suits, casually and politely threatening the lives of innocent children to achieve their geopolitical goals. When Jason is actively hunting Ross, he is not fighting a rival gang member who intuitively understands the established rules of the street. He is hunting a highly trained, deeply corrupt intelligence director who knows every single trick in the espionage playbook. Jason is essentially a blunt, heavy instrument being forcefully manipulated to perform delicate, surgical strikes in a confusing world of mirrors and smoke where every supposed ally is a potential enemy and every given order might secretly be a fatal trap. But wait, let me stop right here and play devil's advocate for a second, because we need to look at all angles. Are we entirely 100% sure that Jason is just a tragic, helpless victim in this grand scenario? I have to ask myself, and I want you guys to think about this. What if a small, deeply buried part of him actually wants this specific way out? Hear me out on this theory. For years upon years, he has been completely trapped in a never-ending cycle of extreme violence, constantly cleaning up catastrophic messes, constantly putting his own life and happiness on indefinite hold for a blind loyalty that has cost him almost everything he holds dear. Maybe, deep down in some dark, unacknowledged corner of his mind, he realizes that this criminal empire is ultimately a sinking ship. Maybe he logically knows that as long as the current boss is in power, the violence will absolutely never end, and Danny will never, ever truly be safe from the crossfire. Could it actually be that the WSB did not just give him a brutal ultimatum, but they secretly handed him an emotional alibi? An ironclad excuse to finally sever the toxic tie that he was far too loyal to ever cut himself? It is a terrifying, controversial thought, but it undeniably adds a layer of absolute genius and complexity to his character arc. Whether he is a fully willing participant secretly seeking an exit strategy or a desperate, cornered hostage fighting for his son's life, the end result is exactly the same. He has fully become a two-faced ghost haunting the narrative. He is currently existing in a state of constant, agonizing psychological duality. To the criminal underworld, he is the prodigal son finally returned, the legendary enforcer who brings immediate stability and commands absolute fear. To the WSB, he is merely an asset, a redacted number on a classified file, a disposable weapon aimed directly at the heart of the city's corruption. But who is he when he looks in the mirror? That is the true tragedy of this storyline. I genuinely think he is slowly losing his own core identity in the suffocating space between these two massive lies. When you spend every single waking second pretending to be fiercely loyal while actively plotting a devastating murder, And pretending to be a compliant government asset while desperately plotting your own escape, the very core of who you are starts to rapidly erode into nothingness. And the specific targets themselves make this covert mission nearly impossible to execute without massive, citywide collateral damage. Taking down Sonny is an emotional and spiritual nightmare that continuously tears at his soul, but taking down Ross and Jack is a tactical nightmare of the absolute highest order. As I mentioned, Ross is not just some street-level thug with a handgun. He is a seasoned intelligence director with unrestricted access to global surveillance networks, heavily armed tactical strike teams, and incredibly dangerous stolen cold fusion secrets. Ross has already proven beyond a doubt that he is willing to threaten absolutely anyone to get what he wants, cornering innocent people in their own homes and turning the entire city into his personal, twisted hunting ground. Jack, on the other hand, is a master psychological manipulator of the highest caliber. Even while sitting in a medical recovery facility, Jack is still managing to ruthlessly negotiate, pull invisible strings, and cast a long, dark shadow across the city's elite. Jason is walking completely blindfolded into a den of highly venomous vipers. If he moves too fast, the WSB will panic and immediately burn him as a compromised asset. If he moves too slow, Ross or Jack will inevitably figure out that the ghost is hunting them, and they possess the immense resources to strike first and strike hard. This specific danger brings us right back to the most terrifying piece of leverage the WSB holds. The urgency of this mission is not just a theoretical threat vaguely hanging over his head. It is a very real ticking clock that is getting exponentially louder every single day. We know from recent events that Danny is not just sitting safely on the sidelines waiting for things to blow over. The kid is already getting actively pulled into the dangerous undertow, teaming up with others to try and sabotage the grand, nefarious plans that Ross is currently putting together. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated panic that must be violently coursing through Jason's veins right now. He knows that his young son is out there, bravely but incredibly foolishly playing a high-stakes game of cat and mouse with a ruthless, highly trained double agent. Every single second he delays his mission, every moment he hesitates to pull the trigger on Ross, is a moment where Danny could accidentally stumble right into the crosshairs of a professional killer. The WSB does not even need to send their own assassins to threaten the boy. They just have to sit back, relax, and let the natural, chaotic danger of Ross's rogue operations consume him. This terrifying reality forces Jason to drastically accelerate his timeline. He has to quickly become the monster the WSB wants him to be, not just to fulfill a government contract, but to literally rip his son out of the path of an oncoming freight train. He is currently trapped in the ultimate, inescapable moral triangle, being violently pulled apart by three completely incompatible, overwhelming forces. On the first point of the triangle, you have his past, the deeply ingrained, almost biological loyalty to the mob boss, who fundamentally shaped his entire adult life and gave him a sense of belonging. On the second point, you have the present, the overwhelming, suffocating, undeniable force of the WSB, a corrupt government entity forcefully making him do their dirty work under the false, hypocritical guise of the greater good. And on the third point of the triangle, you have the future, Danny, the innocent blood that represents his absolute only hope for a legacy that does not involve endless violence, prison, and pain. He absolutely cannot satisfy all 3 points. It is mathematically and morally impossible. To save the future, he must completely destroy the past and willingly sell his soul to the corrupt present. And here is the most agonizing, terrifying question of all that we need to consider. Can he even trust the WSB to keep their end of the bargain? We all know exactly how these shady intelligence agencies operate in this universe. They are built entirely on a foundation of lies, betrayals, and plausible deniability. What actual guarantees does Jason have that once he pulls the trigger, once the criminal empire falls, and rogue agents like Ross and Jack are permanently eliminated, the WSB will not just decide to tie up the final loose end? He is the ultimate loose end. He has to know, deep in his tactical mind, that the exact moment he completes his mission, he becomes completely expendable to his handlers. He is not just fighting a war to save his family from the mob. He is desperately trying to outmaneuver an international intelligence agency that holds absolutely all the cards and has zero moral compass. He has to somehow find a miraculous way to complete the impossible mission, protect Danny, and then completely flip the board on the WSB before they can put a silence bullet in the back of his head.
Goodbye. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the GH Spoilers Daily channel.